Was Manson always kind of nuts, or like it
Well,
that
no,
you're saying that
Manson
the
was
government
actually completely different than what he
he
became in
became?
'67. Yeah, he was nonviolent, mostly. I mean, supposedly he raped a couple boys when he was in his teens
Hmm.
in a juvenile delinquent home.
Okay.
He later said at parole hearings he killed kids. So I
Well,
don't
I mean
know
that seems
what's
kind of
true
nuts.
and what isn't, but he was institutionalized from the time he was about 12 or 13 until he was released in the Haight in '67 from prison, but he had never done a violent crime. It was always petty crimes, and it was always federal jurisdiction. So Bugliosi makes a point of that in the book. He said he had never seen someone serve so much time for such small crimes, and in federal prisons, which prisons are a lot rougher than jails. Plus, they're controlled by the federal government. And
Hmm.
we didn't know it then, but the federal government was experimenting on prisoners. Most famously, now we know about Whitey Bulger,
Yep.
who it was disclosed that he was a subject of
MK Ultra.
non-consenting MK Ultra LSD experiments when he was in prison in the 50s.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so David Smith did the early mice stories, and I draw parallels to John Calhoun's rat studies, and I try to get David to. I still don't know David's total involvement in this, and what he did or didn't do, or whether he was being used, or
Hmm.
whether he was consciously involved in helping. He was getting funded by the federal government for his whole
Right.
clinic.
Yeah, that's what I mean earlier by this stuff being so compartmentalized. One of the things
Yeah,
Bugliosi says when he's talking about the JFK assassination conspiracies is that, oh, Oswald didn't know these people. He didn't. You think he was working for them? They would have had a car waiting for him to get away. But in my mind, it's like it's not like that at all. It's like they've got tentacles everywhere. People working, they don't even know they're working for people. Like I don't
yeah,
know who knows if Manson knew these people or not,
Right.
or knew he
yeah,
was being like puppeteered by people.
yeah,
But as it turns out, and my takeaway is Manson's almost like a microcosm of what the CIA was doing to him, or
yeah,
MK Ultra, right? Like Manson, the way they describe him all the time is he was hypnotizing the family, and they were
yeah.
working under his control. Well, that's what they were doing in MK Ultra. They were
Well, if
trying
he
to
was on
wash it away.
LSD, he might have been doing that.
Well, yeah, they say. I mean, like Tom was just saying, they're going to the amphetamine project and getting dosed up, and then they're doing LSD, and then then basically Manson's doing the same thing to the people in the family. I can only imagine how many other type of Mansons were out there running around. And it's
Yeah.
speculative, obviously, but I don't think it's too far of a reach to think that a lot of these things backfired. Just none of them made national news like Manson.
Yeah, yeah.
But the
I
question
wonder
is
that
why,
too.
isn't it? Like why?
Sorry?
Why?
Uh,
Why?
like why? Yeah, like do you have any? What do you think? Is it really just to create super soldiers, or do you think there's something else involved in why they do these things?
Well, I don't really like to speculate on anything prior to like '73
Right,
because I don't know anything from my own firsthand reporting about
right.
anything post '73. But I think prior to 1973, when the program ended or didn't end, I believe that they began it in good faith. There was a Cold War going on. There was a hysteria, but people thought that, we could become subjugated or, uh, the Chinese communists or Russian communists were going to invade, take over. There was going to be nuclear war. So
Hmm.
they were trying to create any kind of weaponry to combat what they thought the other side had. And the other
Hmm.
side, the Nazis really started using drugs to do mind control experiments. And then when the Nazi scientists were dispersed, we brought a lot of them over here in Operation Paperclip that we were talking about off camera.
Yep.
But the Chinese and the Russians got them too. And during the Korean War, there was a brainwashing program run by China, and the United States learned about it. And then they thought defensively, they wanted to know how to prevent like airmen who were captured overseas from being brainwashed, which they alleged happened. So it began as a defensive thing for them to study how not to let this happen. And then when they
Mm.
realized the power of it, it became offensive and they wanted to learn how to do it better than the other side.
Right.
I'm not even 100% sure that we weren't doing it much longer than we know about, and maybe even before the Nazis,
Right.
because
I'm
everything was,
I'm sure. I'm sure we
yeah,
were. And I have a hard time trying to find a positive spin on it. Although I hear that argument because it's almost like an argument people would make about gain of function and experimenting on ways viruses could attack us and want to get
yeah,
ahead of it. But it always seems to backfire. And then when you're talking about the Korea experiments and the brainwashing, that's in your book. And this quote is something I really loved. Technology has destabilized every atom of human nature. And that's, when talking about the Korean War, human experimentation, that's what scares me is, although they say MK Ultra ended in 73, I'm pretty confident that it expanded into all technology we have today. If that's something that's being said about the Korean War, I'm afraid to think of what it looks like today in all the things that we are plugged into.
Our influencers influencing us.
Right.
And disturbing us.
yeah. I mean, every time there's a mass shooting now, I get tons of emails from people,
I'm sure,
wanting to know what I know about the possibility that that person was, and I'm like, no, it stops at 73 for me. I
it's
don't know
impossible.
that stuff.
It's hard to know, and I'm the same way where I can't help but think it. In terms of just I believe it was last summer, early fall, there was a mass shooter in Maine, and
Oh yeah, I remember.
he was a guy who was in a psych ward hearing voices, and a lot of people were saying it must be MK Ultra, and obviously it's impossible to know until maybe some documents are released later down the road. But it's very similar to a lot of the stories you talk about in Chaos, where also I believe it was in the Army or maybe Navy, I forget which one.
I can't remember. Did they kill him? I know he was like
He killed himself
for a few days.
Then he killed himself. They found him at like a dumpster at an old job site.
Okay, yeah.
But it's tough, and when you look at these stories so deeply, I was curious while reading Chaos. Did you feel a sense of paranoia after a certain point? Like, are you like, I know there's a part in the book where I think you say you're not afraid to have done the call with Charles Manson at your own place, but your editor or someone says to do it at the But were you feeling any sense of paranoia?
Can you leave your house, Tom?
Everybody was trying to make me feel paranoid. I mean, people, my friends and family and stuff, were like, be careful, and I really never felt threatened. I mean, there was one guy, I talk about him in the early chapters, a couple of these drug dealers who were the first suspects in the Tate murders, Billy Doyle and Charles Taco. And, Billy Doyle was in Toronto, and, I knew he had killed people and not gone to prison for it.
Right.
And he said to me how easy it would be for him to hire somebody who could shoot me. And I mean, he used all the weaponry lingo that I didn't know. You get this kind of gun, they could be this far away, he could shoot you right through your window. He did seem to know a little bit about how my bungalow was set up, which made me nervous. I felt a little nervous by him and his partner, Charlie Taco, but Charlie Taco was like an invalid. I'd take him out to Coco's for lunch, and I'd have to lift him out of my car.
That's right.
And then put him in a wheelchair, and he's threatening to kill me. And I'm like, Charlie, I could just drop you and leave you in the parking lot. You can't kill me. But no, I never really became worried about my safety until Vince Bugliosi and I really went at loggerheads, and I knew what he had done in the past, and I knew what he was capable of. And he scared me more than anybody else because he still had, he had a reputation and he had connections and power. And if he wanted to spread a lie about you or hurt you, he would do it. I mean, he told me he'd do it.
Right.
So
on
that
tape.
was, and I mean, one of the biggest disappointments, and I know a lot of my detractors think that I waited until he died for the book to come out. He died, I think, in 2015 or 16, and I was devastated because I really wanted him to be held accountable.
Yeah.
I knew it would be a much harder fact check when we did the book because of my allegations, but I felt confident that all of my allegations would survive a fact check. And as it turned out, so he died 2016, I think. My book came out in 2019. And Little Brown, the publisher, had two different outside legal firms do the fact check to make sure, like, they checked each other's check.
Right.
And when I said to them, I go, I guess you guys are happy that Vince Bugliosi is dead. And they said, it really doesn't make a difference because his wife owns his estate, and his estate makes a fortune from Helter Skelter is the best-selling true crime book of all time. It still sells. so she could sue you on behalf of his estate the same way he could have sued you, because
Right.
most of what I was attacking was his work uh, in the case and that book. So
Right.
they said she would have an easy lawsuit to file if she can find grounds or you've made anything up or lied, but they didn't find a single thing that I had to modify or take out or change.
Do you
So I was
find
disappointed that he wasn't alive too. I wanted him to have the answer to all this.
yeah? Do you think he would have lashed out? You think all the threats would have come true?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting because he found out that my publisher had canceled the deal. He was writing to them. I mean, I have a file of his letters that he sent to them, and I think he believed that he was the reason my book deal was canceled in
Wow.
2012.
Wow.
I got a little nervous that maybe that was one of the reasons, but we talked about
Right.
this before he went on camera. But they assured me it wasn't him; it was something else, financial. But yeah, so when he died, he did not know because I hadn't resold the book until 2017.
Right.
So he probably thought none of this was ever going to come out, and that I
Right.
had disappeared into homelessness or something because he knew how I had spent so much of my money chasing
Right.
his facts about him and the case. So yeah,
Wow.
he
When you're doing this research and talking to all these different people and getting information, even FOIA requests, do you have a system to discern what to trust? Like, is there something?
yeah, I kind of had a methodology that was kind of, I never studied journalism. I was mostly an self-taught entertainment journalist who got
Right.
some lucky breaks and got a career at it. And then I started doing investigative stories for the magazines I worked for about the entertainment industry. I did do one true crime story right before this one that was about a woman who was murdered in somewhere outside of Sacramento and it wasn't solved. So that was the only experience I had really with interviewing cops and criminals and stuff.
Hmm.
Although I actually did do a story on celebrity stalkers.
We need you to do Epstein or P. Diddy. Just pick one.
Yeah, I know. But gosh, now I forget the how I decide. So
Yeah.
I would get access. I mean, what I really worked hard at the beginning of this was trying to talk to people who were, integral to the case, who had never been interviewed before, either cops, lawyers, or witnesses, like Rudy Altobelli, who owned the house where the murders happened, was a really important witness. A
Hmm.
guy named Hatami, who was a photographer, Sharon Tate's personal photographer, who had an encounter with Manson, may or may not, that kind of triggered a lot of what happened later. These guys had never given interviews. And I was lucky because, this was 30 years after the crime. Now they're senior citizens. Now they're kind of bored. They don't get attention. So I got to them at a good time and I was
That's right.
persistent. I was a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Good.
So they would tell me stuff that was completely contradictory to the narrative. And I get really excited. And then I'm like, but how do I know they're not just either misremembering,
Yeah. Right.
inflating,
Yep.
embellishing, or out and out lying? So then I would try to get documents. So I tried to find out what they told the police in their first interviews, and that's in the book. I started chasing the whole LAPD homicide file, which had never been shared, but the second in command cop had the whole thing in Utah, where he lived next door to Demi Moore and Bruce Willis,
Wow.
and then later in Palm Springs. And it took me about 6 years to wear him down enough where he finally shared the whole thing with me. So I
Wow.
would always try to find whatever documents were available, and second and third corroborating witnesses. So I started being able to put value on the stuff that I was finding out that did contradict the narrative by
Hmm.
proving that it was true.
Yeah.
But it's not easy, as you
It's
know,
not.
because you do
Yeah.
this kind of thing.
It's not easy. People. I don't think a lot of people realize how long a FOIA request can take to come through.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if you do FOIAs to the CIA, but I don't even do them anymore because they don't release anything
I
ever.
don't think I have. It's just been. Well, I did one that was the Pentagon for a murder that was covered up, and they.
So the Pentagon might be
Yeah.
easier. The CIA is just, they're never going to release anything that's important. The
Right.
FBI surprises me with stuff that they'll release. Sometimes I think they don't understand what they're releasing. And they often, and this is for any investigators out there, people, I learned this on my own, but don't just FOIA, the main headquarters of the FBI in DC, always go to field offices
Yes.
because every major city has a field office and they have files and they have to respond to. And I've gotten stuff out of like a podunk state in Ohio where Manson might have been arrested for something from their FBI files that don't exist at the headquarters or weren't released.
Right.
And they often don't redact the whole thing like they're supposed to, because whoever's getting paid to do the redactions isn't getting paid enough. And I get social security numbers, I get witness names, all this stuff that's redacted on some pages, but then accidentally missed 20 pages later.
Wow.
Now I'm probably ruining it for everyone because someone from the FBI is going to see this and they're going to give them raises or something.
Don't tag the FBI.
All the feds that are watching each of us on the daily basis are now like, doo, 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 doo. It's crazy to think about. And I FOIA the Pentagon. And I think they might have lied to me though, because I know that there was a murder at a certain place in a town where I'm from.
Oh, go figure, the Pentagon's lying.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And then I also worry about, and I think I know you experienced this while writing Chaos and researching, is them giving you bogus information. Like, do you think about that, or sharing information with someone who then takes it and doesn't share it back with you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was a DA's office here in LA.
Right. When you see that happening, like, see that's the thing that would make me paranoid, because then it's like, are they all connected to this, and have they been told by someone higher up, hey, this guy's talking to you, don't talk to him anymore, push him aside? What is going on there?
That's when I would wake up in the middle of the night and think the world can't be that corrupt and it can't be that efficient, you know. And then you're right. I mean, the secret is compartmentalization, is people don't know what other people are doing, and that's deliberate. I mean, the guy who ran the CIA, and I'm going to get it mixed up now, who inherited it from Helms when Helms left during Watergate. I think it was Colby or no, somebody before Colby or... Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was the guy who ran the CIA after Dulles got fired by JFK.
Okay.
And before he was replaced by Helms, so the early 60s, he said that he never knew about the MK Ultra program. And I believe him. I can't remember why. I did a lot of reporting and research because, and as the head of the CIA, they knew that he would object to it.
Right.
Whereas Dulles didn't. He created it with Gottlieb. So they kept it from him for like 4 years while he was there. He never knew about it until he was gone.
Right.
And at the CIA, they compartmentalized, and that's how they can do stuff and not get caught. You know, they erase the connections.
It makes it easier, right, to get away with these things. And then it's hard to have any accountability because it's just a Mexican standoff of like who did what, and we don't know.